Society often pushes us to fit into these pre-designed molds, whether that be from trends, social media, or friend relationships. So how do we deal with all of that? Hey, welcome to Growing Up Kingdom. My name's Daniel, and I'm so excited that you're here. If you've been looking for a place where you feel like you can be encouraged, where you feel like you can grow in your confidence, this is an absolutely great place to do that. So make sure to stick around. We are starting a brand new series, and we're calling it Living Authentically. This is part 1. So if you want to see more, make sure you subscribe, follow, do whatever you can on the platform you're listening. But we're calling this one Breaking Free from the Pressure to Fit In. In a world that pushes us to constantly fit in, it's such a powerful thing to stand out and not necessarily go with the flow that society has for everyone. Authenticity isn't just about resisting trends, it's about living out the purpose that you have for your life. We're not emulating someone else's purpose, living their life. You're living the life that you have to live. Very often in life, there's this pressure to conform. There's this pressure to conform to society. And in case you haven't realized yet, society doesn't necessarily have your best interests in mind. But you look at it, you constantly got social media screaming at you. You have TV, billboards, everything in culture. Other people are constantly telling you how you're supposed to live, what you're supposed to talk like, what you're supposed to look like, how you're supposed to dress. All these things come from culture, and they try to fit you into this mold. And it can be intimidating to stand out and say, you know what, I'm going to try to do something else. I'm going to try to do something a little bit different. And there's this fear of rejection where we decide, you know what, hey, maybe I don't want to fit in with the crowd. Maybe I want to stand out, do something a little bit different. There's this fear of rejection where we're like, you know what, maybe people aren't going to necessarily like the way I'm standing out. I think we've all been there before, where we try to do something different and it kind of goes against the grain of the way people have been doing things. And they're kind of like, almost maybe offended. And we feel rejected when we try to do something out of the box, try to do something different. I just talked about that, but there's this influence that social media has on us, whether that be Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, any social media platform that you're on. It has an algorithm designed to feed you what it wants you to see. And that can pressure you to feel like you need to fit into a certain mold of what you're seeing. You have to fit into a certain mold of what is constantly showing up on your screen that you're constantly scrolling past all the time. And with these platforms, our generation, we so often also feel compelled to try to make ourselves fit into these standards. When we're posting stuff, when we're on Instagram, when we're on TikTok, we also feel pressured to try to fit in with what everyone else is doing, what we're seeing. And we try to make ourselves fit in with the rest of culture, what we're seeing on our screens. Romans 12:2 says, "And be not conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." It goes on. But the point is, we don't want to be conformed to the world. We want to be transformed by the renewing of our mind, and we want to transform the world around us. That's what we want to do. No one just wants to get lulled to sleep in the flow of culture that just carries you one way, just mindlessly without thinking. We want to be able to think for ourselves and be able to have an impact on the world around us. Think about it. When you decide to conform to the world, when you decide not to live authentically, when you decide to try to be something that you're not, try to do something that maybe culture tells you have to do, when you constantly shape yourself to fit in, you can lose touch with who you actually are. You become like a different person in different rooms. And I think maybe you know what it feels like when you're a different person in a different room. You're with your friends and you're one way. You go home and you're a different way around your family. Maybe you're one way around at work and you're one way around, I don't know, back to your friends again. Maybe you're different around different types of friends. Maybe you're one way with one friend and a different way with another friend. There's all these different ways where we try to fit in and we try to adjust ourselves and try to change who we are to try to be accepted and liked by everyone. But that can be exhausting. That's exhausting when you try to please everyone all the time and do what everyone wants you to do and be the way everyone wants you to be. At some point, you got to say, you know what? This is not working. At some point, you got to realize, you know what? I got to live authentically. I got to be who I'm going to be, and I can't constantly be changing for what everyone else wants me to be. It's unsustainable in the long run. Might work for a year, might work for a couple of years, try to be accepted by everyone and fit in with what everyone's doing, but at some point it's going to catch up with you, and you're going to realize, you know what? I've been doing all of this, and I've just been going along with what culture wants me to do, with what society wants me to do, with what my friends want me to do. But in doing that, I've lost touch with who I am and what I'm like and what I want to do. Now, we don't want to get so caught up in ourselves in an egotistical sense either, where it's like all about us. But I would rather be like me than be like the thousands and thousands of other people that I see on social media. I'd rather be me, because there's only one me, and I'm going to be me. And same for you. I want to challenge you to be you. Be who you are. The Lord called you to be who you are. He gave you a purpose, and no one else has that purpose in life. It's only you. So make sure that you use that. Make sure you don't lose touch with who you actually are. Think about it. When we try to learn something, we usually look at a good example, right? You want to learn to cook, you usually go to a recipe. That's your example. You want to learn how to sing, maybe you look up to someone who sings really well. That's your example. You want to learn to play an instrument. I like to play the guitar. I have multiple people I look up to. Doesn't matter to you at all, but I think my favorite guitarist I love to watch is E. Edwards. If you don't know who he is, maybe check him out. But I watch him. I want to play like him. I think he plays really well without being like over the top, like crazy, but plays incredibly well. Just a solid, good guitar player. I think it's awesome. I was saying that to say what? I don't remember. Yes, you want an example. You want an example when you're trying to do anything. So if we want an example, what's an example we can find? If we go to the Bible, first example that comes to mind is Jesus. He stood out anywhere. Anywhere he went, you never find him trying to fit in here, trying to fit in there. You never see him change his message. You never see Jesus change his message from one person to the next to try to be accepted by them. Now, yes, Jesus changed his approach, and he approached the kingdom of God in different ways for different people to try to break it down to them and try to explain it. But you never see Jesus change the message of who he is and what he's brought to try to please anyone. He hung out with the outcast people that no one wanted to talk to, and he made the religious people mad. It wasn't like the people that no one liked that, thought Jesus was crazy. It was the people who in this case, they represented the face of society. They were society at the time. They were trying to lead people in a certain way of thought and a certain way to do things. And Jesus came and he broke all of everything they were trying to do, and they were mad. But we see that Jesus, he lived very counterculturally for his time, and he stood out from society. It didn't matter what anyone thought of him, didn't matter what other people said about him. His approach was very much, my message is my message. If you want to believe it, you can believe it. If not, I'm not going to change it to please you. It is what it is. And the same way in our lives, we have to be the same way. I am who I am. If you don't like it, I'm sorry, I can't change that. That's who I am. And if you don't like it, you know what? There's 100 other people for you to go talk to. But I'm going to be here. I'm going to be me. Same for you. The Lord's called you to be who you are. If people don't like who you are, and you know you are who you are, and you're unapologetically who you are, you're living authentically in who the Lord's called you to be, then live it. So how do we break free from the pressures to fit in? How do we do that? First of all, recognize the influences. Where do you feel pressure to fit in? Do you feel pressure to fit in on social media, in certain friend groups, or just cultural expectations at large? Where do you feel pressure to fit in? The first step to finding freedom is just to figure out where you feel pressure to fit in. You want to research, you want to learn more about your true identity, who you actually are. Spend time praying, spend time in the Bible reading. What did God say about you? What did he say you were? Who did he say you were? What did Jesus do? How did he live authentically? You want to set boundaries. You got to learn to say no to people. You got to learn to say no to the things that will push you to try to change who you are, that will try to push you to fit in. You got to say no. You got to set some boundaries. Doesn't mean you don't love who you're with, but you got to tell them at some point, you know what? These are my boundaries. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that because I'm staying true to who I am. Saying boundaries protect to your authenticity and keeps you from slipping back into conformity. You don't want to conform with the world. You got to set some boundaries and say, you know what? There's certain things I'm not doing. Now, that's different for every single one of you. Depends on what you feel pressure to conform in. But I advise you to think about it. Think about it. You got to embrace being uncomfortable. At some point, sooner or later, you're going to have to realize everyone will not love you. There's some people who just won't like you. And you got to deal with it. You've got to deal with it. At some point, there's some people that just won't like you. And you got to say, all right, you know what? That's fine. If I know and I'm positive I'm living authentically in who the Lord called me to be, if they don't like who I am, I'm sorry. Go find someone else. You got to be comfortable with that being uncomfortable. You got to be confident that, you know what? Sometimes some people are not going to like you. Sometimes you're going to feel rejected. Sometimes you're going to feel like you don't fit in. But you got to decide that that's worth it. You got to decide that it's worth feeling like you don't fit in for a moment so that you can stand out from the crowd in general in life and you don't get swept along with the current of society. So how do we live authentically in our faith? We have to have faith over approval. We can't constantly be trying to live for other people. It's exhausting. I said it before. It's unsustainable. In the long run, it just doesn't work. We have to be more concerned with the Lord's approval than the approval of everyone around us. Living authentically means that we're trusting God's plan even when it doesn't match the world's expectations. If it doesn't match the world's expectations, you know what? We can be confident we're following the Lord's plan and He's got us. When you stop living for other people's approval and you live in alignment with God's purpose, with His freedom, you experience this release, this freedom, this joy, this peace when you realize you don't have to be pressured to constantly fit in with the people around you. That's the essence of living authentically. It's knowing that you're living in the Lord's purpose for your life. And if you know you're living in the Lord's purpose for your life, you can live fully authentically without having to worry about trying to fit in to please anyone else. So what are some practical steps for authentic living? I would challenge you to take some time every day to reflect, whether you're maybe in bed before you fall asleep, maybe you want to take some time and journal this out. You could do this in 5 seconds. You can do this in 15 minutes. It's up to you. But when I go to sleep, I like to think about my day and I like to kind of run through my day and I'll think, you know what? I did a good job there. I did not conform there. I felt pressured to maybe do this. I didn't do that. And then I'll also think, you know what? But maybe I messed it up in this area. Maybe I feel like I was pushing it in this area. Maybe I felt like I was a little bit too pressured to do something and maybe I did it. And you're not beating yourself up about the things you didn't get right. You're just evaluating it, learning from it, learning where you feel pressure to fit in, where you feel pressure to conform so that you can analyze it and you can feel empowered to stand out in the future. Engage in vulnerable conversations. There's all sorts of different ways where you can talk to other people about your pressure to conform. Now, if you've got a whole bunch of friends who are just going along with society, going on with everything the world tells them to do, those might not be the best people to bring this up with. But there's a lot of great people who just want the best for you. And if you tell them, you know what, I feel like I'm pressured to compromise in this area, I feel like I'm pressured to compromise in that area, they'd be more than happy to help you out. Maybe you could find that support, a youth group, some certain encouraging friends. Different churches have different encouraging circles. I've heard them called different things. Some call them small groups, connect groups, belong groups, all sorts of different things. But it's possible maybe you have a church around you that offers this sense of community. It's kind of like tiny groups where you can meet and you can talk and you can help each other grow. You need to celebrate what makes you different. Now, people take this to such an extreme in the world, but honestly, you need to realize, you know what? There's certain things that make Daniel, Daniel. There's certain things that make you, you. And if you feel pressured to compromise in those areas, realize, you know what? You are who you are. There's no one else like you. So you can be confident and you can celebrate what makes you different from everyone else around you. Trust God's timing. Often we feel pressured to fit in, feel pressured to conform because even though we know that the Lord has a plan for us, we might not see it happening. We might not see, like if we knew exactly what the Lord had planned out for us, we would have no problem. We'd be like, oh yeah, God's got good things for me. I'm going for what He's going for. But the problem is sometimes we don't see it right away. And then we feel pressured to, fit in, do what everyone else is doing because we don't necessarily see what the Lord's doing. But know that He's moving, know that He's got a plan for you. And even though you might not be able to see it now, He's calling you to stand out and He's calling you to live outside of the box of society and outside of culture. Honestly, if you think about it, our generation values authenticity. Our generation values vulnerability. Now, there's not a lot of it, and maybe that's why people value it. But if you think about it, a lot of the people that we look up to, that we think are awesome, it's the people who did decide to break the mold. It's the people who did decide to do things differently. And those are the people we look up to. And that's everyone that now society's following those people, trying to do what they're doing, when in reality, all they did was break the cultural form, the mold that they had, and they broke that. And now in doing so, everyone else looked at it and they're like, oh, and now society's created a mold around that, trying to be like them. But the whole reason they got like that is because they were trying to stand out from culture in their time. Think about it. Everyone you know, it's most likely they did something that set them apart, set them outside of the box that culture had for them at the time, and that they were recognized for it. And now people look up to them for it. We value authenticity. People don't always like authenticity. If you're really authentic, people might not like it, but they respect it. People respect authenticity. If you say, this is who I am, you might not like it, but this is who I am. People might not like it. They might hate it that you're so authentic and you're like, you know what, this is who I am. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. But they have to respect it. They have to respect, you know what, that's that person. If that's what they want to do, if that's who they are, that's who they are. People respect authenticity. Lead by example. Show people that it's okay to be different. Show people that it's fine to stand out and do things a little bit differently. Show people that it's fine to follow the purpose that the Lord has for you instead of trying to chase the same things that everyone else is chasing. When you look back on your life and your friends look back on the influence you've had on them, they're not going to look back and say, you know what, I like this person because they did everything everyone else was doing. They'll remember the things that were unique about you. They'll remember the things that stood out because you did things differently. So my challenge to you is to stand out, do things differently. Don't be afraid to fit in all the time. I want to challenge you to live authentically. This was only part 1 of the series. Make sure you stick around for parts 2, part 3 of living authentically. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, do whatever you can on the platform you're listening. And I'll make sure to catch you in the next episode of Growing Up Kingdom. Bye.